Okay.
So hello. Welcome to another Red Lipstick Talk with Prandata Prim and Nefertiti. So I don't know. I think maybe are you frozen?
Nefertiti, thank you for that introduction, Renee. So,
So we're
drum
gonna
roll.
drum roll. We're
I'm
gonna
fine. Can you hear
yeah,
me?
I can hear
I'm
you.
speaking okay.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, I hear you. Good. All right. So welcome. I see people are coming on. And
Yeah, I'm good.
welcome. And let us know that you're here. Say hello. Let us know. We're going to be talking about many different things. So I don't know if you know or if you could tell, Red Lipstick Talk came from Red Table Talk. So when Nefertiti and I were like, what kind of name? We really both love Red Table Talk. And so it's just so interesting that today's show is kind of stemming from what's happening on Red Table Talk with the whole entanglement with Jada and Will and August. But it's not going to be what the entire focus of the show. But it's an interesting topic that so many people are talking about right now in terms of relationships. And we have had other shows where we've talked about different types of relationships, polyamorous relationships, monogamous relationships. And I think that, we think that it's important to really talk about this, to really talk about, you know, our body, us as women, as people, as, however you define yourself and however you define your relationship. And my personal thought is that whoever's doing what, you can do whatever you want in your relationship. That's between you and your partner, and I think so many people are like, well, she had sex with a younger man and whole polyamorous, they have an open relationship, and there's a lot of judgments. So I don't know, what do you think about that, Nefertiti? Like, what you've been hearing, what you feel like, what's coming up for you with this? Because I know we've both had many different types of relationships that maybe even people might not, traditional people might feel like, oh, that's strange. Why are you in that type of relationship? So what comes up for you?
Hi everybody. So yes, Red Lipstick Talk was inspired by Red Table Talk. Hey Jada, if you're watching. Hey
Don't
Willow.
worry, Jada. We ain't
Hi
gonna do y'all
Gam.
wrong. We won't be doing y'all wrong.
Yes, and part of the reason why our show was inspired by Red Table Talk was because it was a space for us to bring to the table, but in this case, to the virtual world, to our lips, right? Our truths, our questions, our curiosities, and our experiences. And so we always bring that to the show. And I think, I think the thing about this situation, I think that was funny for me or interesting is that she called it an entanglement, and basically how, when we're in a relationship, how are we both perceiving what it is, the weight of what we're in, the expectation. So I think it was a space that opened up kind of a space to evaluate, what is the relationship that I'm in?
Mm-hmm.
How does it relate to the relationships I've been in? And what is an entanglement? And when is it a relationship? So I guess for me, it was like, okay, what's an entanglement and what's not?
Yeah. And what is an
So it was
entanglement?
more,
What is an entanglement
thinking
in your
about
mind?
how we name things.
Yeah, I was just asking, what is an entanglement in your
I
mind?
mean, just from my experience, yeah, just in my experience, I guess an entanglement for me has meant something that has intensity, something that is very, intertwined in terms of desires and
Mm-hmm.
feelings and passion, that there's a very strong presence there. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's, to me, meant something that has a future. I don't know if it's meant something that's beyond sort of the passionate aspect of it. For me, a relationship is an entanglement and so much more. you know.
Oh, really? Wait,
So
so you think
yeah, that's
that
kind of what, and that's something.
you think that relationship is an entanglement? Like how so? Because I guess in my mind, I don't necessarily see relationship as an entanglement, like in general. And I think that there's several types of relationships, and I kind of see them more on an interdependency kind of way, where you're not necessarily, when you're in a healthy relationship, you're not dependent on one or the other. You're interdependent, and you can, be on this journey together, going together, and not necessarily entwined, And so, like, when we look at codependent relationships, I might see that as an entanglement. And so for me, when she said entanglement, I felt like it wasn't necessarily a strong, beautiful, passionate thing. In my mind, I felt like she was trying to minimize what it was. But that was my impression. There's actually someone who wrote something here. Sandra. Hello, Sandra. Welcome. She says, I feel like an entanglement is a very temporary but passionate and quick relationship. Okay, thank you. Those who are coming on, let us know, what do you think when you hear entanglement? What do you see? What do you feel? What comes to you? Hi. Okay, yeah. So that's just how I see it.
I mean, I think Renee, and I hear that piece as well. I think I was just kind of thinking more about the literal, when you think of something tangled, you think of something that's so enmeshed that it's hard to figure out where it ends and where it begins. Right. And so there's something about two bodies. So it's for me, it was more the literal, like, kind of like echoing, kind of like echoing what Sandra wrote, is something that is very passionate. But like I said earlier, I'm not sure if there exists this sort of commitment to something beyond what those entangled bodies, how they find each other. And so I think Go
ahead. Finish.
Oh, no, I was just gonna piggyback off of what you said around there's different aspects, right? There's like codependency, there's interdependency, and I think those are two terms that are very different, right? They're different aspects of how we understand our own relationship and our responsibilities within a relationship, right? And so I think an entanglement, for me anyway, can be either. It could be a codependent entangled mess, or it could be an interdependent entangled, vines, roots. I think the word itself can go in either direction.
So Nancy says, my definition of entanglement, something that you just get caught up in and hard to get out of. You just find yourself tangled in someone's web. Yeah, and I think she's kind of feeling like how I saw it,
Wow.
And this is an interesting thing because, clearly when Jada Pinkett was saying it, she wasn't trying to say it as something very long-term, loving relationship. I think she was kind of saying something where something she got caught up in. But then August, he clearly, in my opinion, from what I've heard on his interviews, did not see it as an entanglement. He saw it as a long-term relationship where he gave years of his life to this woman. And, she minimized it to not even years. Like, he was like years. And so I had been following this story, and he's actually lived with the family, so Jada and Will allowed the two of them to come in. And so in his mind, he had a full-on relationship, full-blown relationship. In her mind, from what she's saying, because I don't know, none of us are there, she's saying, when she says this entanglement, it was not something full on heavy duty, like serious relationship. And so I think that this happens often, right? There's a lot of time relationship. And I know I work with a lot of clients who have been in relationships and they have one perception of how the relationship is going, and then their partner has a whole nother perception. So yeah, so that's an interesting thing to think about, the perceptions and how the perceptions can be different with the two parties or three parties or four parties, however many people are in that relationship, you know. So yeah, so how can I think this is an important conversation?
Yeah, and I think
I think there's like a delay or something.
Sorry, there's a little delay. So I was just gonna say, Renee, I think that there is something really great that you brought up about how, you know, and we use this as a jumping off point. Okay, August saw it as one thing, Jada saw it as another. And I think that has a lot to do with our own references when we come into a relationship, right? So what is my historical reference of what relationships are? And getting into it with what is their reference, right? Because we both had different kinds of relationships. And so I think I always like to start off relationships, you know, whether they'll become more serious or not, really exploring like what past relationships were like for that person, because it gives me a sense of what their references are in terms of communication, in terms of intimacy, in terms of conflict resolution, in terms of open or not. It gives me a background and a context. And I think, you know, when we talk about relationships that are cross-cultural, right, or that are, you know, transnational, we've been living in Brazil for years and we've had numerous relationships. That becomes even more important, you know, like what is this person's history with other people and how does that impact how they come into this relationship and what they understand are their responsibilities and roles, right?
Yeah, because I know like with my last partner, him being Brazilian and me being American, you know, we perceive things so differently, and how I perceived what his role should have been like in my mind as a male in this relationship with me as a female. Oh my God. So I know a lot of people are hating those terms right now, female and male. So there's so much going on. And I just thought about that when I said that. So I know as a man and as a woman in this relationship, you know, and him being from Brazil, like the way he perceived how his partner would be is completely different than me as an American. So there's just all these different, yeah, like, you know, when you're looking at different relationships, and I know that there's a lot of people right now wanting to move abroad, wanting to come into relationships. And I think it's really, really important to think about what your cultural values are, what the cultural values are of that person, of your partner, who you know will be entering into a relationship with, and that way you can, and communication, and constantly having that communication so that you can both know, okay, where am I right now, and where is my partner right now in this relationship, and what are we feeling and what are we thinking? Because I know a lot of times here in Brazil, a lot of the Brazilians might be just wanting to have fun, you know, and because I remember when I first got here, I thought people were interested in something more and they just wanted to have sex. And I'm like, oh, like, you know, you're all over me. But, you know, and so it's just so hard. But I think that one of the things that I've learned is having open and honest communication and being able to express what I want. So there's a question here. Sandra says, do you think she minimized it because he's so much younger than her and she was having so much else going on in her marriage, meaning she just needed something to make her feel good at the time? In my personal opinion, I think that they actually just have an open relationship. I think that they have a polyamorous relationship. And so I think that before, there was a while back where they did talk about a polyamorous relationship, and Monique as well. Monique, she's an older comedian who was on, and she talked about, who was really great. and she talked about having a polyamorous relationship. And what happened, Monique began to get blackballed because of being open and honest about her having a polyamorous relationship. And one of the things that you find specifically in the Black community, we're very Christian, and it's like, oh, you can't be polyamorous, you can't be this. Like that's, you have to be, you have to be pure, you have to be married and have kids, and there's a certain thing. And so I believe that, but who am I to say? I don't know, because I'm not in their relationship. But since Sandra's asking what I think that that's what they have. They have a polyamorous, and so they decided to, in order to not get blackballed, like what happened with Monique when she came out, they decided to put that on a back burner. And so over the years, it just became rumors that they have that. So in my opinion, I believe they have a polyamorous relationship, and Will was fine with it. She was fine with it, and they were doing their thing. I think that also a lot of people are talking about it right now. And honestly, it's nobody's business, really. I mean, everybody can do what they want. Everybody can choose the type of relationship that they want. And I think Nefertiti and I, we wanted to like bring this up more as to be able to talk about the many different types of relationships and cultural, being that we're trying to focus on Brazil as well. But couldn't be remiss to not mention this, because it's very important right now, and we are Red Lipstick Talk. So, so that's just kind of how I feel. I don't know how you feel, Nefertiti.
A couple things. I think that I don't know who they are. I don't know the intricacies of the relationship to make that kind of like why she did it kind of thing. But I think it goes back to what I was saying about references, right? Like maybe she called it an entanglement because of what her references were for relationships. She's 20 years older than him. She has a different notion of what relationships are. And so, that could have influenced why she called it that. I honestly, I don't know, because I don't know what it's like to be a public figure that's that huge. That naming yourself somehow has such a big impact. So there's all this other kind of PR stuff that I'm sure they both have to think about in how they name things. And yeah, I think that's why it's such a difficult situation. And I think that's why, the best thing to do was for her to speak for herself with her husband. And kind of, it's kind of too bad that she was forced to show that there was way more behind the curtains, right? That she was actually going through a really difficult time in another relationship she was in. And that, again, her reference, right, influenced how she understood another relationship that she was having. So
Okay.
That's kind of what I think. And I think, Renee, I think it's, I want to talk about our own entanglements too. I'm curious about yours. I'm curious about what you call an entanglement and whatnot. And so I wanted to ask you, Renee, if you can think of one entanglement that you've had while in Brazil or somewhere else, what was it that shouted to you, this is an entanglement? And what was something, like the biggest thing you learned from that relationship? And you can ask the same question to me when you're done.
That's a great question. I gotta think about that now. Entanglement, because the thing is, it's so funny. I've had so many. Okay, so it depends, right? Like, I feel like one time I was in Salvador. I was already living in Brazil, and in Rio, and I went to Salvador, and I met a guy, and he was hot. He was really hot, and he lived in Sao Paulo, and I lived in Rio, and we met in Salvador. And we had a good time. We kind of ended up having like a little vacation date kind of fling thing. And it was like, for me, it was very passionate. He was gorgeous, amazing. We had some great sex, and it was just like we went to the beach. And so to me, that's like, so that's like even like what you were saying in that definition, that entanglement, that quick, passionate relationship, and quick, and that's how it was. And it was just great. And and we still keep in touch. We're still friends. But like for me, that's like an entanglement. Like, because I don't know. That's just for me. What's one of yours? I think you froze. Hello,
So it's
ET
interesting.
worker.
I
Good
think
afternoon.
going off of, oh, hello, hello.
Mhm.
Am I back?
Yes,
Am I back? Hello?
you're back.
Am I
Yes,
back?
you are.
Am I back? Okay. Um, so going back to the comment about entanglements being something that you get caught in, almost like a web, right? You get caught up in it, kind of not consciously. So I think to think, so I haven't had as many entanglements as Renee,
What are you trying to
but
say?
I've had a few, and so I've had a few here and there, and I remember one entanglement that I learned from. So when I first got to Brazil, I was in a place of really wanting to explore myself sexually and with other people. And I began sort of, meeting up passionately with this particular person. And this person, had a companion already. And there was an understanding that wasn't really clear to me whether, the companion knew or not that what we were doing was actually going on.
Uh-huh.
Then it became clear to me that it wasn't. And then, we continued. And for me, it was fun. But then it became entangled in the sense that feelings became entangled more on the other person's end than on mine.
Mm-hmm.
And this was an important experience because it kind of put into question, like, how, when I'm in this situation where there's kind of not open communication with another person and their other relationship, what am I facilitating? Like,
Right.
what kind of, it got to a point where I was like, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. Ethically, it didn't matter how much, the passion was intense, the passion was good. But it wasn't, it was, there was a part of me that was like, I can't, participate in something that is hurtful to somebody else, especially another woman. So the moment I called it off, the person, he went crazy and was like, no, I'll leave her for you. And, we can start something. And I was like, this isn't what I'm asking for. I'm asking for
Mm-hmm.
you to be honest about what you want from people and not just use either me or the other person. That's not what it's about. So that was a
Right.
good moment for me to kind of come into my power as somebody who recognizes, what kind of integrity I want to have, even if it's just, that's what I learned from that entanglement.
Yeah, I'm trying to think the one that I gave, like, what did I learn from that? To have fun. No, it's actually interesting. What I did learn is that, you know what? It's okay to be free and it's okay to enjoy life. And if you meet someone and you want to have a great time, have a great time. I think that it's so often that we feel like we should not have pleasure. And, we're on earth to also have pleasure. And it is our birthright to have pleasure. We're
Mm-hmm.
sexual beings. And, relationships and things, it doesn't have to be a certain way. It doesn't have to be that you just are with one person and you only have sex with that person and you can't have sex, you can't have a fling, you know. And I think that we cut ourselves
Mm-hmm.
off so much that we end up suffering more than being able to just enjoy, being able to just enjoy life, enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
ourselves where we are in any given moment. So, and I
Mm-hmm.
think understanding that
Mm-hmm.
at different points in our lives, at different times, we might be more wanting to be in a relationship, and then at another time, we might just want to have fun and be free. You know. So we got to honor that. We got to honor that and respect where we are in any given moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what's
But I think there's something to be said, Renee, about how we think about what free means.
mhm.
Oh,
Okay?
sorry, there's a
Yeah, there is a
delay.
delay. Um,
um, yeah. So I guess free doesn't necessarily mean reckless
right.
with yourself or with other people, which is something that I've learned through that through that entanglement and others. That there can be this tendency to sort of kind of go the reckless route. And I'm thinking a lot about, okay, now we're in this moment of quarantine, of pandemic, of health having this other dimension, of virtual reality having this other role in our lives as well, right? So I'm thinking a lot too about, okay, how is it that we're navigating that? That we're both, you're in Brazil. Are you dating in Brazil? How are you doing that virtually? I'm in a relationship, but now I'm distant. So, how are we, what have we come to use as tools for being able to have integrity in any kind of relationship we decide to have, given whatever difficulty or crisis is going on in the world?
hmm Yeah, I think that big thing, that integrity, is being being true to yourself, being true to your partner, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what's going on, and that integrity being true wherever you are in that moment. So at one
Mm-hmm.
given moment, so like if you're in a distant relationship like you right now, maybe you don't know how long
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be. Maybe you and your partner might have to sit down and have a talk and say, okay, do we open up our relationship right now until you come back?
Mm-hmm.
You know, do we
Mm-hmm.
have a polyamorous relationship? And then when you come back, we return to being monogamous. I think that the most important
Mm-hmm.
thing is having these conversations that might be so difficult. And then when you're having it, deciding together,
Mm-hmm.
what is it that's going to be best for both of us? What
Mm-hmm.
is it, what is it that we need right now? Can we
Mm-hmm.
get our needs met without someone else, or do we have to? And so I think that's the biggest thing. And like
Mm-hmm.
when I was in my polyamorous relationship, one of the things that we did, we always used a condom. We got regular testing, but always use the condom, and that was just for our safety,
Mm-hmm.
because you just don't know. And so you have to be honest. You have to have communication at the base of it all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. So you were in a polyamorous relationship with a Brazilian while you were in Brazil?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I was in a polyamorous relationship. I might have been the entanglement, honestly. I might have been his entanglement. So, because
Time gives us
he had a
perspective.
primary partner. Yeah, he had a primary partner before me. And when I met him, I knew about that.
Uh-huh.
And he did say they were in an open relationship, polyamorous. And then, we
Mm-hmm.
started dating. And so, yeah. So, well, he was younger than me though. He was 35 and I was or he was 33 and I was 45. So, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Do you think age is an issue or something that impacts a relationship or how we perceive relationships? And I mean age, not just number, but also maturity too, definitely.
well, so that's good that you brought that up, because you can be 30 and be immature, or you can be 30 and be mature. So it really depends on your maturity level,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that where I'm at in
Mm-hmm.
Brazil, for example, I'm 40. How old am I right now? 45 or 46? I don't know, 46. I don't know how old I am.
Right
So,
now.
yeah, right now. So I think the thing is, because I'm here and where I'm usually going out, I tend to meet people in their 30s. Most people here in their 40s are already married with kids, whatever. Or if they're single, I don't know. I'm just not
Mm-hmm.
meeting them. So I tend to meet younger people. And so, I feel like it's okay if the two of you can have a good conversation and you're able to, like for me, I need to be stimulated mentally. And if you're not stimulating me mentally, then it doesn't matter how old you are, whether you're 50, 45, 30. You know, there's some 50-year-olds who just can't stimulate me mentally as well. So, you know, I think that's more important. And let's see, Nancy wrote, maturity level plays a big part. Age is nothing but a number. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely feel like that the maturity is the biggest thing. You know, I met a guy, I was with another guy who was 20 something, and he was very mature. He was quite mature and very spiritual. And I just loved it where he was from, you know. So
Mhm.
that's that's what I think. What do you guys think? Those who are coming on, what are your thoughts? Do you think that age is important, or do you think that age is nothing but a number? And what do you think on that, Nefertiti? And how does that relate? I have a two-part question for
Um,
you. I have a two-part question for you. What do you
mhm.
think about that? And how does that relate in terms of if you're in a homosexual relationship? Because typically, more people think of this as an issue, I think, when you're in a traditional heterosexual type relationship, as the man should be older, right? And the woman should be younger. And then if the man is dating someone who's like 20 years younger than him, you know, there's always talks about those different things. But if you're the same sex, do you still have that same kind of pressure, or do you have those things? Do people talk about that? So that's that two-part question.
Okay. Okay. So it's hard because me personally, I don't. I agree with Nancy, like maturity, and with you, Renee, that it's based on the person and the conversation you have. You know, the number doesn't always make a difference. For me, in the queer community in Brazil, and then in the queer community in the US, it's not really an issue that comes
Mm-hmm.
up, at least, you know, the community that I roll with. It isn't really an issue. I think that, you know, there's just kind of other things that influence or impact, you know, the direction of a relationship and how strong or how evolved or how mature it is. I think that, you know, there's all kinds of factors, but no, it's not really an issue. And yeah, not
So
really
why
an
do you
issue.
think why do you think there's a difference then? Why do you think in the heterosexual community there's a difference with that age?
I think because of patriarchy, because of
Mhm.
sexism, because
Yeah.
of chauvinism, there, you know, that is centuries old, where, you know, it's a practice, um, mostly European, where that we've been taught over generations that there is a social acceptance of young girls being with older men, and not always with consent, right? So there's a there's this idea that young girls are almost like property to whoever claims them, and so I think this
Mhm.
idea is something that we've been taught in different ways in different institutions, right? So in our families, on TV, you know, in books, in different stories, in Shakespeare, you know, all these things that we read and we have to consume as we're learning. There's these like sometimes overt and sometimes subversive ways that we learn these things. So that's why I think that's kind of the thing. And then when it's flipped, right? So in the case with Jada and August, there's all this, you know, it suddenly becomes an issue. Oh, she was an older woman, kind of like taking advantage of it. You know, that becomes something unnecessarily like pointed out as an issue. So that's what I think.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's good. I think that's good. Yeah. So what people are coming on, say hello. If you have any questions, comments, what do you think about the dating age? What do you think if you're an older woman and you date a younger man? Yeah, I agree with you. What you said. A lot of it, I think, has come from as well. You know, in the patriarchal system, having safety to keep kids safe,
Mm-hmm.
from, little kids safe from predators. Um, and so, yeah, 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 yeah. Mm.
Yeah, there's a lot of different. I mean, I think age is one consideration. I think a bigger one that's been big for me, and I don't know about for you, Renee, is sometimes um, there's like, sometimes there's fusing like where do people come from culturally takes time. And I think there's moments in my relationship where I get impatient because we're not totally seeing each other yet in some things or some aspects. There's still a lot of me that I'm teaching and a lot of her that I'm learning. And so there's this added layer of, and that is included in that is the language as well. Like this whole other world of understanding what it is to be in the world and how there's moments where I have a hard time. So I don't know how it's been for you, Renee, the sort of cultural differences, if you think that's something that is hard to navigate, if you figured out some sort of strategies for that, for folks who may be, developing relationships abroad or with other folks.
Strategies. Around that. Yeah, I'm laughing because that's still a challenge. That's still a challenge. Still a challenge.
Yes. So I think one that I've learned with Julie, so she is doing, my companion, she is doing a yoga teacher meditation course, and it's made for her doing a lot of meditation, a lot of breathing, and just being conscious of breathing. And so we've had a lot of moments of like, we need to just stop what this disagreement is about and like both breathe and cool down our heads and and regroup when we can kind of like talk about things with a calmer head, right? And I think, I don't know if that's necessarily a cultural issue so much so as like personalities, right? Like I can get kind of riled up more than her, but I think that there's this aspect of knowing how to give space and time to things more so than what we expect, right? Because I think as people who work in the world, we're expected to produce and do things sort of quickly, but our relationships don't necessarily have that kind of timing. So that's been a big lesson for me as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. I think culturally, because each culture is going to be different. So I think that when you're looking at, you have to, in addition to looking at the culture, each person. And I think honestly, the biggest thing, and it's always a challenge, is communication. Because so many things can get lost in translation. And which is why I laugh and I say it's still a challenge. Like, because and I think, and when I say that, and when I laugh and I say it's still a challenge, I think, and I think that's also a learning thing, to be able to laugh at yourself, laugh at the situation, and know that okay, everything is going to work out. Everything is going to work out how it's supposed to be. Whether you continue in that relationship or not, it's going to work out how it's supposed to be. And I think that a lot of times we take things so seriously, and we feel like things have to be a certain way. It has to go a certain way. And we have to learn how to release that rigidness, that controlling, and allow things to flow a lot of times. And when things are able to flow, things flow and happen a lot better. But when you're trying to control it, then it's not going to work. It's not going to flow easily. And I'm saying flow. I mean, I can't think of another word. And so I think that's the key. Not being rigid, communicating and understanding. When I think about my last ex, we had so many cultural things, and ultimately we separated because of that. So and it's like, well, not ultimately because of that. Actually, it was more because of work. But I also think that was a cultural thing, because I felt like he was lazy, and I think so the Brazil, they have a different working kind of ethic and standard than Americans, and I'm very much a hard worker, and I'm very much like this, and I was like, to me, I felt like, things weren't getting done. And so again, that was a cultural difference. And so at that time, I wasn't able to be like, well, these are cultural differences. It doesn't make him a bad person. I was just in my head, like, no, things need to be this way. If we're going to be working together, it needs to be this way. And so I did learn to kind of let go from that after the fact, right? I learned to let go and not be so rigid that things have to be in a certain way, and being able to say, okay, this person comes from a different culture, it comes from a different, and things will still get done, and just trusting and being okay. So, yeah. So, tonight's show is earlier, as you guys can see, and I'm glad you guys were able to come on and check us out even earlier. We're doing earlier because this weekend, starting tonight, I will be leading the Sacred Kink Retreat, and so this episode is not going to be as long as we generally have it, for like an hour. So this has been really, really good, and I'm glad we got to have a good amount of time, even though it just doesn't feel like a lot. Like 40 minutes already passed, and I feel like it's only been 10 minutes. I feel like there's still so much more that we can talk about. But gotta go. Yeah, but like, what would you say have been like, you want to kind of like give a nice little summary of what we've talked about, these talking points and important things for relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try my best. I also had this idea, Renee, to kind of throw out questions for folks who are watching, for myself, and for you to think about in our relationships, whether they are with someone who is in the same city as us, or if they're with somebody in a different city that we're not from, or we're dating someone who's in the town that they're not from our town, or, if it's only virtual. There's so many compositions of relationships right now. And I think I wanted to leave people with some things to think about, like questions, based on kind of like what we've just been talking about. Yeah. I think one of the things, as you were saying and talking about letting things flow, I think we can kind of think about, okay, who am I in the relationship that I'm in, or the relationship that I want to be in relationship to letting things flow. So what do we need? For example, what does water need in order to flow? It needs space. It needs movement. It needs direction. And so kind of thinking about, how do we give space? How do we give direction? I think communication, to me, it's like almost like the winds, right? How do we give space for communication for the relationships that we're in, or the ones that we want to be in? And sort of that, like, when do we know to sort of surrender control? I think sometimes there's ideas about where we think we need to control the situation, and when is it that we need to surrender it and guide the direction together. And if the way it's being guided together, if there's difficulty, then how is it that we stop, we breathe, and we look at things together? So I think we both talked about, codependency versus interdependency. And I think we're both very on the interdependency tip, both striving to be and celebrating that kind of relationship. And so I don't think those are things we can think about if we're thinking about really building interdependent relationships, not just with the people that we're romantic with, but, we have mama issues, we have daddy issues, we have sibling issues. So how is it that we can bring that also into those relationships as well?
Right.
That's all.
So, yeah, and that was perfect. That was perfect. And I think that's the thing. Like, a lot of times, one of the things that I actually loved when I watched the Jada Pinkett, the episode, we saw that she was human. We saw that they were human and they go through things. And I think that's so important, and that was one of the things, like, and that's why I said, I'm still going through this now. And I know that so many people look to me for all the answers, like, I'm doing everything perfectly, but we're all human beings. And so There's a thing when we try to look at someone else for the answers, whether they're famous or not, and think that other people are up here. No, we have everything that we need. You know, the answers are inside of us. We need to go within. And so that's why I like these questions that you have for people to answer, so that we can go within and do our work, do the work that we need to do, so that we can heal ourselves and heal our relationships, and not look for the outside, not look at other people to be our relationship role models, because we're going to get let down, because nobody's perfect. No one has a perfect relationship, no matter how it looks, and relationships are all different. So thank you guys. If you enjoyed this, give us a like. If you got something from this, share this, and share this with your friends, your family, your cousins, your nieces, your nephews, your parents, whoever. And yes, give us a thumbs up. I never say that. Give us a thumbs up. And
it's a like.
And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And we'll see you next Friday back at our regular time. All right.
Thanks, folks.
Happy relating. Happy relating. Bye.